Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian. Today, we are taking a look at one of the bottles I feel like everyone's already been talking about being one of the best releases of 2025 so far. That is the new Jack Daniel's 14. Now, there's a lot of people on YouTube talking about this bottle already, and there's a lot of folks who are asking the people who are talking about this bottle if they were given one because it seems like it's kind of a media train. I will say I was not given a bottle of this. That said, I did get the chance to try the Bourbon Pursuit bottle that they were given of this bottle. That's the reason I was able to try it. But the reason I want to do a video here, because it falls into a flavor profile of things I generally like to drink, which is why I wanted to bring it to the people who follow my channel here. I don't have the information that was sent out with this bottle, but I believe it goes as largest age statement they've had on Jack Daniel's product in quite some time. This is batch 1, comes in 126.3 proof, things like that. Let's go ahead and dive in. While we let this one open up, give me a like and subscribe, jump down below and leave me a comment if you haven't already. Help me continue to grow the channel here in 2025. I had posted a picture of this last week and had a lot of folks asking, how is it? How is it? How is it? I think there's a lot of people who are curious about this, whether they're genuinely curious about it or they just keep seeing a lot of folks talk about it. And I'm sure that's why you're here too. And I will say also, I really enjoy these releases. Now, I don't have any of them. I haven't been able to find any of them. The Jack 10, the Jack 12, the Coy Hills, obviously a lot of people have been going after. I was able to get some of the first batches of that. And this is going to follow in the footsteps of a lot of those releases so far. So let's go ahead and dive in on the nose. And the nose brings out these sugared berries right away, these candied berries right away, almost like picture like spreading powdered sugar over like blueberries or like a fresh blueberry pie. Fragrant fruit, seasoned oak, kind of a mature oak. And then even has this sort of the charred wood, the barrel char element kind of present here as well. Not in a toasted way, but you can definitely tell it's got seasoned wood as well as some older mature wood as well. Man, this really is one to sit with. I feel like even in the couple of minutes that I've had it open, the nose really starts to change. I liked that kind of sweeter oak note, but the longer you sit with it, that sweet oak turns into, I don't want to say a tannic oak, but more tannin-driven oak, more of kind of a damp oak, I might say sometimes. And I find that note most usually in older releases. And I don't mean older releases age necessarily. I mean older releases like older George T. Stagg releases, or that's usually when I would have used that kind of language. You've probably heard me talk about that. So probably the last time I mentioned that might have been in the King of Kentucky. It might have been in the 2022 George T. Stagg releases like that. But again, you get that kind of more musty, tannin-rich oak, as well as these big growing brown sugar notes, rich cola syrup notes, dark cane sugar almost notes, like very, almost some molasses kind of cane sugar. It's not super rummy because that a lot of times I think signifies too sweet, and it's not that sweet, but it does have that kind of reduced molasses, brown sugar type of sweetness that is just really prominent on the nose. Those blueberry-like notes, they start to morph into more traditional cherry. Tobacco starts to creep in. Leather, old leather starts to creep in. And then a sweet milk chocolate, almost like Hershey's syrup. Really inviting for sure. Let's go ahead and dive in. I mean, the pour is weighted. It lays on the tongue, but it doesn't come off too proofy. And that's an important factor because as much as I like King of Kentucky, one of my biggest kind of jabs at King of Kentucky sometimes is that it tastes the proof that it is. It tastes big, and I just wish I had a little bit more restriction. And I feel like this is weighted, it's thick, but it's balanced in what it is. It's chocolate forward, and I don't find that all that uncommon from a lot of other Jack Daniel's products that I've had in the past. Like the nose, it's definitely one to savor. I mean, the more you taste it, it keeps changing and evolving. And that's one thing that I really, really like in pours like that scores it higher. I feel like it starts to get in those things that are hard to articulate as a reviewer, especially in words. But even here, it's kind of something you have to experience. You would have to experience, I have to experience to really see how it nuances differently than other pours. The red fruits that are present, classic, seasoned oak, as to be expected for 14 years old, but especially the way it weaves together with the chocolate notes that kind of start to pour, really enjoyable. But on paper, it might not sound all that exciting because I feel like I'm just regurgitating the same types of notes I've said in other classic bourbon profiles. But what I do need to articulate is that the experience that's happening here is wider than a lot of other pours, I guess. And that's a good thing for me, and I would think it's a good thing for you as well. And it's not just the starting flavors. It's not just how weighty it is in the glass. It's all the supporting notes that I am having a difficult time articulating to you all. There's leather, there's a slight bit of maple, like a maple sugar type note as well, but they're all veiled underneath those initial notes that I already described. And as it moves through the palate, it gets a little less sweet, and that's not a problem here. You're left with the barrel notes, with the wood notes. Honestly, it's not all unlike, it reminds me of when I went back to Zach Cooperage before and I was doing some video work trying to capture them charring the inside of the barrels, and you have lots of wood aromatics around you. You have lots of kind of those torched wood aromatics around you. And I feel like you get left with that kind of lingering on the palate. I'm not a cigar smoker, but I have smoked cigars, and I almost have a palate lingering as if I had just smoked a cigar. So a very robust, slightly smoky, chocolatey, kind of deep lingering on the palate. Continues this nice kind of fudginess. I really enjoy that. The only thing that makes this different than some pours like the George C. Stagg or something like that, or even sometimes King Kentucky, it's kind of missing the coffee note. Not quite there, getting close, but more in the sugars and the chocolates than it leans kind of into the espresso. And it does, again, I kind of mentioned it kind of briefly on the nose, but it's a note that weaves through the nose and backing on the palate, this kind of dark molasses, almost like I feel like I've got some kind of dark rums that are like this, these kind of heavy, dark sugars, not all that sweet. They're just dark and ramped up and intense. And that lingers on the palate with this kind of dark chocolate note. It loses some of the sweetness. However, like I mentioned, this is a pour that you really want to sit with, because as you just sit a little bit, eventually it continues to move. It has a long finish, continues to evolve kind of subtly at first. But then you notice the sweetening up again. You notice more of those candied fruits from the nose return in the long, long finish. Pleasing raw sugar notes, the berries all over again. It's like this. It's like if you take your time with this pour, it has this like perfect circle it keeps coming back to. Definitely one not to rush through. I think this would be a great one to go try at a bar if you're planning to be there for a while and you just want something that you can sit with. This would be a great time to check something like this out. Don't rush through it. Now, so many people already talking about this being Whiskey of the Year contender in 2025. I feel like it makes you think back about some of the releases from past years and kind of just put it into perspective a little bit. For me personally, you all know, for some reason, there was something about the Russell's 15 I didn't necessarily jive with. And I feel like I have an easier time sipping this one than I do the Russell's 15. Although it might miss some complexity and depth for some folks. I feel like without immediately comparing it to one of the barrels of King of Kentucky, it has some similar flavors, but I feel like King of Kentucky has maybe more finesse, more complexity on general, but those are single barrel expressions. And if you want to take away the variability, the Jack 14 release is definitely going to do that, because you should have consistency bottle to bottle. And how much you like oak, I think, is going to depend on how this fits with the other Jack ones that, again, I don't have them to compare to, but I feel like the Jack 12 I enjoyed because it was sweeter and almost like the last year's release of the Coy Hill. While it was, a little bit bigger, more robust, it didn't have the age, but I feel like those profiles leaned a little sweeter. The first Coy Hill release was just huge, robust, had tons of stuff going on. Kind of hard to compare to something like this, which is a little more balanced, more relaxed, has more of the characteristics like a Russell's 15, like a King Kentucky, where you want an elegant, nuanced, weighty, kind of a sit with pour. And again, let me say this. One of the things that I always suggest to people when they watch reviews is to find reviewers that they relate with. And one person that I relate with when it comes to scores a lot of times is Matt Porter from ADHD Whiskey. So I went and looked at what he scored this one compared to a couple other things. So he scored this one a 9.05. And let's give a couple of reference points that I have on my list here. He had given the Jack Daniel's 12-year an 8.8. He had given the Coy Hill Single Barrel a 9.1. The Wild Turkey Generations, a 9.1. So we're talking really close here. The Coy Hill Small Batch, he had given a 9.4. The Heaven Hill 17, he had given a 9.7. And I feel like I fall pretty closely aligned with him. I don't have the Wild Turkey Generations to compare to. I really did like that one. I would put it around the same region as well. And I would say I'd put it on par with the Coy Hill release, just depending on what you think about high voluptuousness, fullness versus something that has more age teased out. But if you know me, I do like more age teased out. Now, actually, interesting thing, if you go back to that comment I mentioned about the older oak-like notes, I feel like that's a through line in some of these other things that I've mentioned from Matt's reviews. Even the 2022 George T. Stagg, which I think I made mention to, he has as a 9.2, not all too far away from this here. So this is really, I think, just a solidifying where I think this kind of structures into some other pours. It has a similar profile to those. If you like the rich kind of cola-like notes, you like a mature oak note kind of leaning into a slightly smoky, lingering note, and you want an experiential old oak pour, I think you're going to find that in the Jack 14. Once again, that's a Jack Daniel's 14 year. Hope that maybe help place it against some other things. I'd love to hear from you all though. If you all got a chance to try this one, or if you're looking forward to trying this one, let me know down in the comments below. If there's other pours you want to hear me talk about in the future videos, let me know again down in the comments below. Thanks as always for tuning into another video. Guys, hope it was insightful, informational, and until next time, we'll see you all later.